Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Bruin Dash, the UCLA show on Dash Sports TV. My name is Sam Connon. I am joined once again by my wonderful co-host Jack Perez. Jack, how you doing
I'm
today?
doing great, Sam. It looks, if I can tell correctly, that you've started growing out your beard a little bit from our bet that we made a little while ago.
A little bit. It's been pretty much 2 days at this point, but for those of you who weren't on the show, was it last week? No, it was 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow. It's been a wild ride, this tournament. Jack and I had a bet that if UCLA beat Alabama, then I would have to go a month without shaving. If UCLA lost to Alabama, then Jack would have to go a month without shaving. The contingency was that if UCLA won and kept winning, I would be allowed to not shave until they lost. But now that they lost, they lost to Gonzaga on Saturday. We'll talk about that. Here goes nothing. I've done it before. I'll do it again.
It's looking great, Sam. I'm looking forward to a month into it. Remember last year during quarantine, you started growing it out, and I was shocked by it. But now I'm ready for it. I think it's time for a fresh look for you.
Thanks. I might go a little Drew Timmy mustache, but that's a whole other story. Well, UCLA men's basketball, their Final Four run came to an end this weekend in Indianapolis. UCLA lost to Gonzaga in overtime, 93-90 on a miracle buzzer beater by Jalen Suggs. People are talking about it already as one of the most miraculous shots, games, endings of all time, and for good reason. So we'll talk about the game. We'll talk about UCLA's run up until that point, and as well as one of their stars through all of March Madness, Johnny Juzang. He averaged about 23 points per game through the tournament, and maybe put his name into the NBA draft conversation. So we'll talk about his chances of returning. And then we'll also be taking a look ahead to next year. Will UCLA be able to bring the band back together? Can they make a run like this again, and why or why not? So if you have any thoughts on those topics or anything else UCLA men's basketball related, leave it in the live comments, and we'll get around to all of those before the show ends. So with all that out of the way, Jack, this Final Four run, neither of us actually saw it coming. We may have picked a few wins here or there, but overall, a pretty miraculous run. It ended in a heartbreaking but insane fashion. Where does this rank for you all time in your life, or even beyond your time as a UCLA student or fan or media member? Where does this rank in UCLA's runs to the Final Four or tournament runs in general?
I mean, for UCLA history, it's definitely got to be up there in probably the top 10. The only thing holding it back is that they either made the national championship game or won a title. Obviously, at UCLA, they don't hang Final Four banners. Maybe they make an exception this year. They probably shouldn't, in my opinion, because UCLA is a Poly is a place for champions, and a Final Four run, amazing. It's great for this group. I don't expect them to hang your banner. But out of all of those runs, this is the least expected. The 95 team was pretty good. Both 2006 to 2008 teams were all really good, seeded pretty high. I mean, yes, they had to pull off a couple miracles along the way, but none of them were able to win a national title either. So I'd put this ahead of all of those ones from those Jordan Farmar, Russell Westbrook, Kevin Love years. But all time, this might be a top 10 unexpected all-time run from any team. I mean, you have a VCU earlier in the 2010s. You had those Butler teams with Gordon Hayward. I understand all those were pretty good. But this UCLA team, while they were talented, lost a lot of games, didn't really have a signature win on their resume. You and I were talking about this earlier. I mean, who did they beat this year? Colorado once in January. That's probably their biggest one of the year. They lost both times to USC, lost to Stanford, lost to Oregon, lost to even Oregon State in the Pac-12 title, Pac-12 championships. So this UCLA team didn't have that bravado. That didn't seem like a team that could go out and win big games. And all of a sudden, they're able to win a few in a row. That's unprecedented. And it really makes you proud to watch. Now, it made it even worse to watch that game against Gonzaga, because before the game, I was hoping either UCLA win or just Gonzaga blows them out. So that, it's a top team. You kind of expect that. But the worst thing to happen would be to be a close loss, and not just a close loss, but a loss on a heartbreaking shot. It's Jalen Suggs put a dagger through the entire city of LA with that shot.
Yeah, at the same time, though, I feel like this is UCLA and the players and coaches and a lot of people around the team hate the Cinderella label, but it kind of was a Cinderella label, and it was deserved. They were an 11 seed. They were from the first four. So when you go toe to toe with the number one team in the country and the team that to this point has been more dominant this year than any team has been in the last 20 plus years, that's an accomplishment. I'll say that. And then comparing this team to the 06 through 08 teams, I know. So 07 and 08 also went to the Final Four and lost in the Final Four, I think because they were higher seeded. And this one's a better story. The 21 team is better than 07, 08. And even though the 06 team went to the national championship game, I would still probably take this 21 team over them. So I'd say this 21 team is the best at UCLA since the 95 championship team. They're the most lovable, iconic, however you want to put it. Maybe not the most talented, not as many NBA guys as that 08 team or even as some of those early Steve Alford teams. But this is a team, a unit that people are going to remember forever. And I just want to say that you're talking about maybe some way to possibly commemorate them. It's a very simple way. It's you hang a banner. And I'm not saying I want 37 banners up there or whatever for all the Final Fours and Elite Eights. No, it's really simple. You look at how other schools do it with conference championships, and UCLA should do the same. You have UCLA has their 11 championship banners in Pauley Pavilion, and then they have one that says Final Four appearances, and it lists all the numbers on one banner. And you have Pac-12 championships listed on one banner. It's a silly thing that some UCLA fans have in their head that puts them on this whole other level of this superiority complex where it's like, oh, yes, we have 11 championships and we know how to handle success better than anyone else. But, I mean, why is it such a bad thing to honor success other than championships? It's not like putting up a single Final Four banner that lists all of them takes away from those 11. So there's a very easy way to commemorate this team and honor this team and maybe draw in some more recruits who want to see banners and accomplishments that happened during their lifetime. These guys that are coming in now are born in 2001, 2002, 2003. Come on. They're not – they want to see accomplishments that have happened in this century. They want to see the NBA players who have come through UCLA. They want to see what they accomplished. And I think there's a very easy and simple way to do that. And I'd like to think that the team and the athletic department get on board with that sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I think possibly that could be because a lot of UCLA fans are also LA Laker fans, and they have that whole, we only hang championship thing, which as NBA fans of any other team except for maybe the Celtics, even the Celtics fans don't really agree. Sam, you can speak to that one. But I also think that this might be the weirdest team to make a run because they looked so bad in some of these games and so good in others. And there was no way in my mind that they were going to put together 5 consistent, 6 consistent, 7 consistent games in a row to reach this point, because we had just seen 4 games where they were pretty good in the first half and then absolutely collapsed in the second half. And, you and I watched them the entire season. I remember heading out to the Rose Bowl for a UCLA football game, and while I was there watching them play in Ohio against Ohio State, they looked good. Not a winning team, but they looked good against one of the top teams in the country. Then we watched them in February and January. They're losing games in Pullman to Washington State. Yeah, they didn't have many bad losses other than that. But, I mean, again, at USC, granted without their 2 starting big men and Mac's first ever college experience against the Mobleys, which is unless your team is Gonzaga, you've had problems against the Mobleys this year. USC wiped the floor with UCLA. There's been games where UCLA has not looked that good, and yet they took it to every single team that they faced in this tournament, which not only speaks to this team's talent, but the talent of the Pac-12 overall. I mean, you could talk about, the Big Ten's tough, or Gonzaga had a weak road to the Western Conference. This Pac-12 conference was so good this year and so undervalued by everyone in the country.
Yeah, it's a funny narrative when Big Ten teams lose to Big Ten teams, and the takeaway is, oh wow, what a gauntlet! They're really beating each other up. That just shows how good they are. And when the Pac-12 does it, it's, well, see, Oregon can't beat Oregon State. It's like, well, that doesn't make sense. I feel like either every conference loss is because it's a tough conference, or you can't play both sides. I think that's silly, and this tournament proved it. We talked about it last week on the show. It's just it's kind of funny to see how it all panned out. It's kind of ironic, and I love to see that. But then something that you're bringing up about how bad this team played at the end of the season. I mean, if you ask Mick Cronin, he'll say his team didn't play bad, and in a lot of respects they didn't. But they played bad when it mattered most, and they lost 4 in a row. So a bad taste in everyone's mouth. It just was not a good end to the season. Even if you don't want to say they played poorly, it wasn't good. That's what makes this run and this tournament team maybe not as unexpected, but maybe a better story than a Final Four run like VCU or Loyola Chicago from a few years ago. Because, yeah, VCU went from first four to Final Four the same way UCLA did. But no one was hating on VCU. It was more just, I don't really know much about them and their conference. They're a small school. I don't really care. I'll pick the higher seed, whatever. And they upset their way to the Final Four, and that's great. Loyola, same kind of thing. Whatever. Who cares about their conference? And they're just a small little school. And they proved everyone wrong, and that's great. But UCLA, there are people saying, oh, UCLA stinks. Look at the way they finished the year. They shouldn't be in the tournament. Like they're playing Michigan State. They're going to get the floor wiped. Oh, absolutely. No, it's a lock. UCLA out in the first 4. Okay, well, UCLA out in round of 64. They were going out there and proving people wrong, even though that wasn't their goal. They say they don't listen to the noise and look at the seed numbers. That's what made this so much more fun than any other run from any other team that hasn't won a national championship, is just how much hate there was against them. It wasn't like visceral hate, but it was just how many people just discounted them, who threw them aside and didn't give them a chance. And look, they ended up in the Final Four playing one of the best games we've ever seen. So that's got to mean something.
And lest anyone forget, they almost did lose that first 4 game. They were down big to Michigan State. That was a terrific comeback from the Bruins.
It took an and one from Jaime.
Exactly. There was almost no doubt from a lot of people at that point that UCLA was out of this tournament. But the best part of this, besides the Final Four run, the magic of it, Johnny Juzang's run, is that UCLA got farther than USC. In a year where USC was supposed to be the better team, they got the better rank. They also lost to Gonzaga, but they got manhandled by Gonzaga. The Mobies looked bad. Gonzaga beat them by more than 15 points, as they did to every other team they faced this tournament other than UCLA, who took them to overtime and only won on a last-second 3. UCLA made it further than USC. The entire city of LA was lighting up blue and gold, as it should. And next year, oh boy, is USC in trouble. Because this UCLA team and Mick Cronin are definitely looking for revenge.
Yeah, absolutely. UCLA still hasn't beaten USC under Mick Cronin, but that's a story for another time. We'll get around to stuff like that. But for now, you mentioned Johnny Juzang. He went on an absolute tear through the entire tournament. He was the East Region most outstanding player. He scored 28 against Michigan in the Elite Eight. He scored 29 against Gonzaga, in just a really great effort out of him, just as an all-around player, but especially as a scorer, as the lead man in an offense. And rightfully so, it earned him a lot of praise and a lot of eyes from the national media, from NBA personalities. You listen to the way they talk about him on the CBS and TBS post-game shows, how these these outlets and these other teams and everyone is covering him. It's great for him, but it does raise the question: will Johnny Juzang put his name into the NBA draft pool? Will he declare this spring heading into this summer? Jack, what are your thoughts? Do you think he makes the move?
The big question is, will he or should he? Because will he? I don't know. It's about 50-50. His draft stock is probably never going to be higher than at this moment. He's still pretty young. He's only a sophomore. And if Jalen Suggs doesn't hit that shot, UCLA wins in double overtime. It's because he misses that little floater, grabs his own offensive rebound, and puts it right back up. And that is one of the shots of the tournament at that point if Jalen Suggs doesn't 5 seconds later destroy UCLA's hopes. Should he? Will he? Possibly. Should he? I'm also torn. My heart says no. Johnny Juzang should come back, finish the job. This UCLA team could be really good with him as the full-on leader. We talked a lot this year about Johnny Juzang, and there were some games where he lit it up. There's the 32 points against Washington where he scored literally half his team's points to will them to a win somehow in one of the worst games of UCLA basketball other than Johnny Juzang that I've watched in a long time. There's some games where it looked like he was ice cold and he couldn't get anything going. My brain says he probably should leave. Who knows who's coming back next year for UCLA, but teams are going to be aiming for them. They're not going to have that underdog mentality. I mean, first of all, UCLA is always aimed for because they get a lot of good recruits and a lot of, that brand of UCLA's teams want to be the teams to beat UCLA. After a miraculous tournament run like this, people are saying he's a lottery pick. I don't think he's a lottery pick. Well, I think he could be a lottery pick. I think maybe if he works his way up there, he deserves it. I don't think NBA teams are going to take that chance on him right now. I think he's a late first round, early second round pick for a lot of NBA teams. That leaves a lot of variance for you. If you get picked in the first round, you're looking a lot better. But all of a sudden, you start falling into that second round. A lot of those guys end up in the G League, and that's tough to escape. Do you want to end up in the G League for a couple of years, or do you want to run it back one more time at UCLA, possibly in contention for being a top 10 team, being a Pac-12 Player of the Year favorite, possibly being a Pac-12 first teamer? That's a lot of pressure on Johnny Juzang right now, but I'm going to say he will and should probably declare for the NBA draft this year.
Yeah, those are the two questions whenever you have a guy who's up for this kind of opportunity. I'll start with should he, and I'm going to say no. He shouldn't. Obviously, his decision, not mine. But if I were in his shoes, it doesn't seem like that's the most logical choice. He's still super young. This was pretty much his freshman year because he reclassified to go to Kentucky as a freshman last year, which in what would have been his senior year of high school. This was essentially his freshman year of college. So this was his freshman season. If you look at the full product he put together for the entire season, would you say that's good enough for him to go one and done? I don't think so. And obviously there's a huge recency bias, and for good reason, because the March Madness is the biggest stage these guys ever play on, and he's getting a lot of attention because of how well he played in those big games. But I mean, you look at guys like Chris Wilkes and Jalen Hands a few years ago. They entered for a little bit. But they didn't go one and done. Juzang had a better season than the two of them, and obviously ended up on a much better note than either of them. But I would put him in that boat where if he goes, maybe he's a late first round pick. This is going to be a really deep draft. It's a really complicated draft because of COVID and the new G League team. It's going to be busy. It's going to be messy. And I think it might be better for him, instead of rolling the dice on maybe being a late first rounder and more than likely being a second rounder, to come back and show that this March Madness run wasn't a fluke. Because he showed in these last 6 games that he can be a high-level scorer, an NBA-level scorer. But I think teams are going to be looking for more than 6 games. And yeah, he had the Washington game, and he's had a few really good games and good moments over the course of the season, but he was inconsistent. The team didn't always play well when he scored. So I think, and it really took until the end of the season for him to kind of hit his defensive potential.
Mhm.
So I think there's a lot more for him to show NBA teams. It would do wonders for his draft stock if he came back another year. He'd pretty much be a sophomore, so it's not like he'd be too old for some of these teams. He'd still only be 20 years old going to the draft, and maybe he can be a late lottery pick if he shows that this wasn't a fluke. So should he? No. Will he? I'm going to say no. I don't think he will.
I understand that, especially the defensive part. But a lot of this UCLA team didn't hit their defensive stride to the end of the season. And boy, did they look good when they did. That was great. They looked so good in the tournament, except for the Gonzaga game. But in that Gonzaga game, it was all offense, all game. Can't fault them for that. If Gonzaga is going to score points, you have to score points to keep up with them, and that's okay. The only problem with Johnny Juzang coming back next year is he guaranteed those touches? Is he guaranteed to get the moments to shine? He might get, a few games, like a Washington game, like these NCAA tournament games, but I think the variability of the roster, Jaime Hawkins is still going to be here, Tiger Campbell is still going to be here, possibly Cody Riley is probably going to stay, Jules Bernard is probably going to stay, David Singleton. You've got guys coming in, Peyton Watson, Will McClendon. That's not even talking about guys deeper on the bench, Jake Kyman, Jalen Clark, possibly a Chris Smith coming back. Is he going to get those guaranteed touches? Is he going to get the chance to shine next year, or is he going to be another cog and Cronin system? Now, if he's another cog and Cronin system, that's huge for UCLA. That's amazing because he's definitely one of the best pieces out there in college basketball to have on your team. But for him and his draft stock, is that the right move? NBA teams like getting guys younger. We always see them trying to jump up to get young guys that they think they can develop. If an NBA team thinks that they can take a shot on Johnny Juzang and develop him on the defensive side, because he's already got the height at 6'6", he's got the shooting touch. Can they develop him defensively if they think they can do that better than Mick Cronin, which Mick Cronin's a pretty good defensive coach. So maybe they can't. Maybe they want to send him back for another year so that he can train under Mick Cronin. I think at this point, though, with this March run, it's the ceiling for Johnny Juzang right now in terms of the public's view on him. And the public can sway NBA teams to draft you a little bit higher than possibly, not that you deserve, but, is Johnny Juzang going to go over some mid-major guy whose team didn't make the tournament because he had a lot of eyes on him and fans are pressuring teams? It's possible.
You see, I would disagree where you say this is his ceiling. I think just strictly on the offensive side, because I think we both agree there's more room for him to grow defensively. But on the offensive side, at 6'6", 210, maybe he can put on a little muscle, a little more weight for NBA teams. But at 6'6", he's probably going to be playing more shooting guard than small forward in the NBA. It was kind of positionless here at UCLA with their wings. And I know the NBA is transitioning to positionless basketball, but you're really going to want him to play the two in the NBA. And if I'm an NBA scout, if I'm an NBA team, I want to see how he does with ball handling. I know this tournament he went ISO a lot, but it didn't really take a lot of ball handling skill. It was more just the hunch over, run some clock, and make one or two moves. I want to, which is good, and it worked in the moments that he used it in. But I want to see how he can grow as an offensive player because he's a great college scorer and he's shown all the tools necessary to be a good NBA scorer. But there are some little things here and there where he can come back and he can show that he can play this position or defend here or rebound here or play within this system. I think doing all of that would benefit him greatly. Maybe he doesn't put up as gaudy stats as a lot of people, but he showed in this tournament that you can be a piece in the system, a cog in the system, and also put up 23 points per game. Probably won't do that for a full season, but he showed it's possible. And
honestly, I think it's probably likely that he goes over 20 points per game. If he comes back, he's definitely in the running for Pac-12 Player of the Year. We can switch over soon, but I don't see much competition being there in the Pac-12 this next year. A lot of really good guys are leaving. There's a new coach at Utah, so maybe some of their best guys leave. Colorado, USC might not come back as strong. Who knows what's happening with Arizona State or Arizona? Johnny Juzang possibly in the front running for Pac-12 Player of the Year next year. I don't know how much NBA teams are looking for that compared to looking at his NCAA tournament games this year. But man, oh man, would he be so good. I project if he does come back, he's going to average over 20 points per game, which is going to be huge for a UCLA team that just not this season, but the season before had one player average over 10 points per game.
Yeah, I wouldn't go 20 because you got Peyton Watson coming in. Who knows what Chris Smith's going to do. But if he came back, I think he would show a lot of NBA teams that this wasn't a fluke. So I hope that's what he does for UCLA's sake and for his. So with the Johnny Juzang talk out of the way, let's broaden things out a little bit. Jack, do you think that Mick Cronin and UCLA can replicate this kind of run next year, whether that's take the momentum into the regular season or put together a similar postseason? We've already talked about the roster. Most of these guys probably coming back. But what do you think they need to do in order to run it back and be in this spot again next year?
Play consistently defensively the entire season, which was a big problem this year until the NCAA tournament. For some reason, they were able to turn on. I mean, they held both Michigan and Abilene Christian under 50 points. Michigan's a little bit tougher task than Abilene Christian because Abilene Christian wasn't able to really force turnovers. But if you can play that way the entire season, UCLA's in a great spot, no matter who you have on the roster. Now, if you get one of Chris Smith or Johnny Juzang back, this is a UCLA team that should be a top 10 team next year, which I know is saying a lot considering they were not ranked for a lot of this season. But they showed at the end of the year that if you just play consistent defensively, force some turnovers, get some good transition buckets. But even that, their slow tempo really takes teams out of the game. Your Pac-12 is not going to be as hard next year. McKinley Wright's leaving. The Mobley brothers probably both leaving. At least one of them is. Who knows what's happening with the Arizonas? Who knows what's happening up at Stanford? The Washingtons hopefully shouldn't be a problem. Unless Oregon State's able to replicate that magical run, UCLA is in prime position to take this conference. All Mick Cronin needs to do is defense, 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 which is his style. And it was just surprising this year that it didn't happen. There's possibly not going to be Jalen Hill there next year, so we'll see what they do at the big man position. But who's going to get the minutes next year? Especially on the wings. You've got Jake Kyman, David Singleton, Jalen Clark on the bench right now. You got Will McClendon, Peyton Watson coming in as recruits. Yeah, Jaime. You got, if Johnny Juzang comes back, Jules Bernard is going to be a senior. If Chris Smith wants to run it back for a fifth year, that's not even to mention Tiger Campbell up at the point probably coming back. This is going to be a small team. Cody Riley's probably going to come back, but if Mac and Kenneth don't improve greatly, he's probably going to run a lot more small lineups. But defensively, this team could be scary. And that's really what they're going to have to consistently work on all year long. You can't wait till the tournament every single season because who knows if that Michigan State game goes the other way. All of a sudden we're talking about, well, all these guys are coming back, but does UCLA really want all these guys to come back right now with this team losing in the first four? That doesn't look very good. But since they're a Final Four team now, it's, well, all these guys are coming back. Where are they going to play them?
Yeah, and I think that winning in the first four kind of got the monkey off their back, off of Mick Cronin's back. You can say he got a tournament win in his first, you can say 2 years, but there was only one tournament. So they did something in his first 2 years. And then he turns into a crazy Final Four run, which does put more expectations on this team. Like you said, UCLA always has a target on its back as UCLA, but after going to the Final Four with all the expectations they're going to have next season, people are going to be taking swings at him. And I think that's okay. That's fine because they're going to be probably the most talented team in the Pac-12. It's hard to project other teams' rosters that I don't know as well, that we don't know as well. Like, is Chris Duarte going to come back? Is McKinley going to go back to Colorado? We don't really know because of COVID and eligibility, but if the people leave who are supposed to leave or should leave, we know Timmy Allen's transferring out of Utah, so that's a blow to them. what's Thompson going to do at Oregon State? Either way, even if everyone comes back, this is the favorite to win the Pac-12. They were the favorite to win last year, and then they had Smith and Hill go out, and that was even after Nix had left that people knew they were going to be the favorite. This team's going to be the favorite again. The minutes thing is going to be, I don't want to say an issue because it's a good issue to have if you have too many good players, but it'll be a new task for Mick Cronin where at the end of this year, he had a really short rotation where he had that starting five plus Singleton as a sixth man, and then Clark would play here and there, but sometimes he couldn't cut it. He had a really bad first half against Gonzaga. Kenneth Muba had a great game against Michigan, but for most of the regular season wasn't really in the right mode. It wasn't really fitting what they were trying to do. Mack wasn't ready yet. Kyman didn't really find his shot this year. So it was really, you had those six guys, especially once Hill and Smith left. He worked with a really short rotation this year, and he's going to have the opposite problem next year. It'll be fun to see how he works it out, who he prioritizes over who fits his system better. I'm really excited to see Will McClendon because looking at his highlights, he's someone who can push it a lot better than the guys UCLA has right now. Really good rebounder for his size and position, great outlet passer. So I hope he can pull through there, and I hope that this lineup works itself out in a way that puts the most talented guys out there on the floor. And if they do that, UCLA is an easy favorite to win the Pac-12, probably a top 10 team to start the season, and definitely have the Final Four run in them if everything bounces the right way, the way it did this year.
Yeah, and a lot of teams are judged based off their tournament, because that's what everyone's watching. That's what everyone sees at the end of the year. If you're a casual fan, that's what you tune into. You're not tuning into every game like Sam and I are. I just want to see an impressive regular season. The last time UCLA really had an impressive regular season, I guess you could say the back half of the Pac-12 schedule for Mick Cronin last year, but it was the Lonzo Ball year. And yeah, they only went to a Sweet 16, but they had to play Kentucky in the Sweet 16 as the 2 seed. A Kentucky team that they had beaten earlier that year, but a Kentucky team that had the likes of De'Aaron Fox on that, who Lonzo Ball just couldn't.
Malik Monk.
And Malik Monk, yes, the great Charlotte.
Two of them were unstoppable that game.
Oh, and you know what? That's okay. Sometimes you run into teams like that. If UCLA had been the 11 seed in Gonzaga's bracket, they probably wouldn't have made it out of that bracket. If they'd been put in Baylor's bracket, maybe they wouldn't have made it out of there. If they'd been put as an 8 seed, as we talked about last week, an 8 or 9 seed, maybe they don't win their round of 32 game because they had to play a 1 seed really early on before building momentum. Mick Cronin's just got to build a culture there, and that, he's doing that. He's doing that pretty well. He's got a couple good recruits next year. He's already got Amari Bailey the year after. He's building something. And that's what he keeps talking about, the culture. He's building the culture there. They're looking good. They are really finding their identity under Mick Cronin, and that's what UCLA needs to do. And honestly, I wouldn't mind a championship or two thrown in there during Mick Cronin's tenure, but just build off something next year. It might not be a tournament run. They might get bounced early in the tournament next year. But build a good regular season, build a good foundation, because you might be losing a lot of guys after next year and the year after, and someone's got to replace them, and you'd rather replace them with high-level recruits because of the culture you built than guys that are just coming because their parents loved UCLA.
Yeah, definitely. And you're talking about the culture and kind of establishing something. You're right. Cronin's talked about that a lot. And having that in place, and I think before this Final Four run, I don't think that was here. After the Final Four run, I think it is. The biggest positive about that is that having a culture and a coach is going to be around for a long time, and a roster with consistency and a certain type of guy, both mentality and fit in the system, it gives you the ability as a member of the media, as a fan, to project a little bit, to look into the future. Where college basketball, it's so hard when the season ends in a 64, 68 team tournament, you can't really say, oh, they're going to win this year, like you can in the NBA when there's series and only 16 teams make the playoffs. But when you have consistency and you're a highly respected program, you can say, okay, Maybe they don't make the Final Four run next year because they get bounced in the Sweet 16 in a good game. But over the next 5 years, I'm going to say this team will make multiple Final Fours, and I think in a 5-year span, that's when the title drought ends. And that's the ability that we have looking at this program. When you have the consistency, when you have the good culture, we can sit here and say what's going to happen in the next 5-year span. You couldn't say that with Steve Alford. He could get fired the next day. He was going to bring in top recruits who didn't pan out. You never knew. There was no culture here with Alford, and there is with Cronin, and that helps us kind of take a look ahead. And looking ahead, I think they're going to win a national championship in the next 5 years.
And Cronin has already proven he's a good coach at Cincinnati, but can never get over the hump there. And some of that had to do with the players he was able to recruit. It's a lot harder to recruit in Cincinnati than it is in Westwood. He can sell people on this school. He can sell people on this location. He can sell people on the legacy of UCLA. The only weakness that UCLA has when it comes to recruits is recent success. And Mick Cronin has already changed that in year 2. In his first tournament appearance here, Mick Cronin has turned that around, and there's literally no weakness in being able to recruit kids to UCLA. But that also comes with there's now no excuse for this team to not be able to succeed in future years. Maybe that's not a national title. Maybe it is a national title within 5 years, just like you said. But it's got the recruiting. It has to come in recruiting. It has to come with fan attendance, and it has to come with sustained regular season and some postseason success. If Mick Cronin can achieve all of that, they might build a statue of him right next to John Wooden. Possibly a little short. I don't know how they're going to do that, but at least a statue out somewhere outside of Pauley.
If they do it to scale, he'll be a head or so shorter. I'll say that. But you're talking about recruits and bringing them in. They want recent success and how that's been a whole. How do you honor recent success? How do you honor the Final Fours from 06 to 08 and in 2021? How about a banner? So that's maybe a discussion we can dive into a little deeper in the offseason. We got a few months before football now, before we get back to men's basketball. But we'll be back here next Monday to continue talking UCLA on Dash Sports TV. You can follow us at Dash Sports TV on Twitter. You can follow me at Sam Connon. You can follow Jack at Jack C. Perez. So, Jack, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Thanks for having me, Sam. Have a good flight back from Indianapolis.
Appreciate it. So, thank you for watching if you watch live. If not, come back next week, catch us live, and we'll see you later. Bye-bye.